Okay, we're live. It's 6 o'clock here in the UK. We haven't done one of these for quite a few months. So thanks for coming along and watching tonight. This is the 8th K9 live talk that I've done. So all the others, if you've missed any of the others, they're all available on Facebook and on YouTube. And this is going out live tonight on Facebook and YouTube, and also Twitter as well. So this is going out to quite a few people. So tonight we're really lucky to have a new guest speaker, Frank Holmes. I've only ever met Frank once before, and that was when I was a lot younger. And he was he licensed me 1 year when I worked for the MOD. But Frank he's a career dog man with the British military, and we're lucky to have him here tonight. So here I shall bring him in. Good evening, Frank.
Good evening, Stu. I believe you paid me £35 to let you pass that VSET licensing, wasn't it? I
Yeah.
thought you paid 20, so you owe me 15 quid.
Yeah, that was.
Oh,
Yeah.
you
Yes, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yes, I'm very well.
Thank you for doing this.
Yeah.
We've obviously had lots of speakers from around the globe, but Simon the vet was the first British person. You're the second one, but you're going to talk about dogs tonight. You've obviously had a long career, and you've been to lots of places and done lots of things. So, do you want to sort of start off by telling us bearing in mind we've only got an hour, Frank, and I know your CV is quite extensive. So tell us a bit about what you've done, how you got into working with dogs.
Yeah. So good evening, everybody. Hopefully you can grab a couple of little golden nuggets from this hour's talk with me about my experiences with dogs. I didn't actually want to become a dog trainer when I first joined. I was always going to join the military, first and foremost. But those of you who are young or old enough as me, I'm 51, can remember a series called The Paras, which was shown on BBC TV during the 80s. And they followed 480 platoon through. And that was what I was going to do. I wanted to be a parachute regiment soldier. And fortunately, the careers officer, who was 7 paras, who's artillery paratrooper, he said, don't join them idiots. So I was talked very quickly out of it. And the only other fascination that I had was dogs. For my work experience, I worked at kennels. My first real experience was a dog that had been nailed to a door under the stairs, literally crucifix fashion. And the RSPCA, as they were doing those days, kept the dog for 14 days. No one could get near it. How they got it into the kennels, I don't know. And I just used to sit outside his kennel, to the point where after a couple of days, I managed to get in, managed to tickle his nose, and within 2 days after that was walking him around the fields. So I thought this is something that I could do. The Army had a veterinary corps. I didn't know much about it. Based up in Melton Mowbray, you have to go and do a 2-day assessment. I actually had to do it twice because the first time I'd missed the window, so I had to go back again. And fortunately, I got through. And then, as you do, you go through your army career as a dog trainer, which we were in those days. You train protection dogs. I banged out about 24 in the first 18 months. We had heavy commitment in Germany, so there's a lot of dogs still going to Germany. And obviously we had issues in Northern Ireland, so there were dogs going to the maze and places where British forces were based. I was then quite fortunate to then go to Northern Ireland, and I'm sure we'll talk about that during the hour, some of the experiences. I then had a couple of years, 3 years in the jungle. That is a fabulous experience if you're a dog handler, and some real groundbreaking stuff. And that's probably where I really cut my teeth as a dog trainer, because I was on my own. There was no support. And so when you're training a tracker dog and you're training an infantry patrol dog, which is a dog that sniffs out ambush and is used in anti-ambush, you really do learn an awful lot about scent, handling skills, and the ability to try and not be bored sat in an ambush for 12 to 18 hours, which is absolutely shocking, really. I then came back and did a couple of tours in Bosnia and Kosovo, which again was good. And we worked with the EDD dogs, which were dogs that were going into minefields after someone had been maybe involved in an RTA, and they had a feeling that the area might be mined. So they would use a dog to search up to and around the vehicle, which would take a human to do 50 meters about 8 hours. It was taking the dog 20 minutes. So the capability was sold within an instant. They could helicopter in, or they could enter from the roadside, just depended. And I was involved in that. And then I came back. I went to Kiev Barracks to train soldiers, which is, again, if we come on to talk about some of the courses we're developing, was nothing to do with dogs. It was training recruits. It was training the junior, senior, and middle management of the British military. And I got heavily involved in the development of training, which at the time I didn't think would have anything to do with my dog training career. As it turned out, was probably the most influential part of my dog training career, because when I went back to Melton as the chief trainer, I started writing the courses to update them that hadn't been rewritten for 20 odd years. Lots of tours in Afghan. We developed a capability, which again, I'm sure we'll talk about as we go through, which I think helped, and I don't take any credit, certainly the young guys and girls that did it and put themselves in harm's way, put military working dogs back on the map. Because after Northern Ireland, or when Northern Ireland calmed down, I felt, and certainly it was a feeling within defence, that there was no real requirement for dogs, certainly search dogs. So Iraq and Afghanistan, for all its bad things, what it did do is, again, as if the MOD would need educating, is that dogs play a huge role in operations. Yeah. I left in 2012 after training, overseeing the dogs for the Olympics, which I thought was a nice finish. I sat on the LOCOG committee, which again was good. So, and I thoroughly enjoyed that, and left in March 2012, and on the Friday, and started my new job on the Monday, with literally no gardening leave whatsoever. So complete and utter glutton for punishment.
So you've basically, once leaving the army, and you've just followed through, and you've just kept working with dogs, Frank.
Yeah, I was quite lucky, because there was an opportunity that came up. The Australians, they have their version of their dog trainers course. So they take a couple of guys who are just, they call them doggies or sappers, and they train them to be dog trainers. And they try and put one or two in each of their locations. And it was an opportunity as a civilian instructor. After leaving, I say on the Friday, very quickly, I then went to Australia. So I was still in that military environment, and it was a really nice way to sort of move out of one uniform and into another, but still be in that bubble where you still talk the same language, you still have laugh and jokes and beers, and to be honest, it was nice, because I think the Aussies were where we were before, when we come to talk on about how our training developed post Iraq and post Afghanistan. So it was nice to be able to say to them, you guys are exactly the same as what we were maybe 5-6 years ago. And I'm sure now they're probably just the same as what we are, because the beauty of things like this is that knowledge can now be passed globally just on the click of a button. So yeah, it was a really good experience. I really enjoyed it, and we trained some nice dogs for
them. You've hit on a few things, a few reasons why I wanted you to come on to this, Frank. Obviously, you a huge career with dogs, or of all different, different types of working dogs. But one of the main reasons which I wanted you to come on here is because you've written courses, you've developed, qualifications, and standards, and have played a big part in that. And unfortunately, in the UK, there's standards are especially in the private sector, it's a bit of a grey area. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted you to come on, because you've written courses, and you've developed that side of thing for the British military. Can we talk about can we sort of start at the beginning and talk about selection and assessment of dogs and that type of thing? I've had a few questions about how to assess dogs. What can we sort of? I know it's a huge subject on its own, selecting dogs and assessing them, but can we talk for a little about that, please?
Yep. Let's talk about so I went on to detection 1992. If I said to you that take away the veterinary tests and all the other tests aside, how long do you think the assessment was for a detection dog to enter training in the Royal Army Veterinary Corps? Have you got any idea?
Well, I know a figure that's banded around quite a lot in the, with police, and possibly in the private sector, is a fortnight, so 2 weeks. So yeah, somewhere around that.
Depending on your throwing arm, between 5 and 7 minutes.
Okay.
You would do a normal retrieve with a magazine. You would do a delayed retrieve, probably an SLR magazine, might be an SMG magazine, and then you do a blind retrieve. And then after those 3 retrieve, that dog, and I say take away all the other assessments, the veterinary, the hips and all the rest of it, that dog would enter service. And that dog in 1992, as chosen by the procurement officer, would pass training.
Right, okay.
And for you to try and fail that dog after those 3 retrieves, you had the devil's own to try and fail it.
Right, okay.
So that's selection for the MOD in 1992. Now you can go to the other end of the scale and see I'm not going to say the country's name because that's unfair, but I've seen an assessment where they do 16 assessments, can take 4.5, 5 hours. They'll drive to your location. This is when I was in Holland working as pretty much as a vendor, I suppose, supplying dogs to the military, UK and US. And they would go through all these different assessments, whether it be temperament assessments, bite work, searching, environmental, socialization. I've been down to the Met Police to watch their 49-day test for puppies. I've been to MPA and watched their 10-week test. I've seen our own MOD test done. And I think for what I like is in terms of selection, I don't have a good experience of taking puppies. I can see a litter of puppies. We bought a litter of puppies for the conservation project last year. Every single one of them failed. So my expertise is not on pups. I can't tell you whether by doing the 49-day test with the Met, if they still do it, I don't know, or the 10-week test with MPA and any other puppy development tests that are being done, I could not tell you which one is going to be a detection dog or a police dog or the rest of it. What I have 5 things that I look for when I'm going to Mrs. Moggin's house, who's got probably a Cocker Spaniel that's doing the wall of death around the living room, and it's either going to be her or the husband going out the door. Yeah. So that's what I'm looking for. Social skills. If it's been in a family, you can imagine 2 little screaming kids. It's probably living quite next to a park or a busy road. That's just ticking every single little box that I like, because she's put in all that environmentals that I don't necessarily. I'll need to assess it. I probably don't need to train for it. So you've got the social skills, you've got the environmental skills. Those 2 are absolutely crucial. And what we're starting to find, a word that's being talked about a lot now, is we say about character, but actually what we're looking for is resilience.
Yeah.
So when a dog fails, there's going to be, I mean, look at UK in the next 4 or 5 weeks. There is going to be no bonfire nights. There's going to be no organised firework displays. We're going to have the 4th of July for probably about 10 or 15 days, because every Tom, Dick and Harry is going to be firing fireworks off. And I feel so sorry for not just, I've got a couple of dogs that are scared of fireworks. But I'm looking for how quickly that dog recovers from an incident, whether it be a bad training session, whether it be the fireworks going off. And if he recovers quickly and gets back to normal jogging, to use a term that as an ex-PTI, that for me is absolutely key. So I won't orchestrate it. I won't drop a feed bowl on the floor. That's one thing you could do, to drop a feed bowl on the floor to see how he copes. But resilience is something that, if you really want to work a dog at a high level, is something I think the dog needs to have. And that's something that's coming more and more into our selection of the dogs that we want. So that dog's ability to recover from something that may have not gone completely well. And then you've got the other normal ones where we want to see the retrieve. I want to see that dog run as fast as he can if there's a brick wall and go through it and pick that toy up. I don't care if he doesn't return. If he wants to keep it, little Springer Spaniels do that circle around you where they pretend to give you it but don't give you it. Cockers and pointers and some other breeds will take it off to the corner and kill it. Certainly my pointers will go and kill it and you won't get anywhere near them. So that's quite nice. A little bit of hunting ability. So I'm looking for, and again, you've got to imagine that this dog's probably never been trained to hunt. Yeah. So we're looking for about 30 seconds where I'm just looking to throw the toy into an area where he can't see it and looking for that intensity in which he searches. And the example that I say to the people, if I'm speaking to them on the phone, imagine I've got, so let's say Sian wants to go shopping. She's my partner in crime. We are due to go shopping, clothes shopping or shoe shopping. She's not really a clothes person, but that's an example. She's sat in the car and I've lost the car keys. You can guarantee I am hunting as fast and as hard as possible in the house to try and find them keys, because my life depends on me finding them keys and us going shopping. That's something I don't think you can put into a dog. I think you can develop it. I think you can enhance it. But I think Mother Nature and a little bit of nurture has produced that. So I have those 5 things, and I say resilience is coming more and more into how I assess dogs. And I probably always have done it, but it's now a tick box where I want to see what happens, how quickly that dog recovers when something goes wrong. And if he recovers quickly, that is something you can work with. And that tells you that little character, he's a one to keep. He's a one to take to the next level. And if you have time to have the dog for a couple of weeks, then great. A lot of people, you've got to decide. Certainly, you will know as much as I do that if you see a dog on a site, it's going to be gone very, very quickly because everybody's looking for it.
Yeah. And what about what kind of age are the dogs that you're taking in at the moment?
So, in an ideal situation, so we are absolutely toppers with dogs at the moment. So I'd be looking at around about 4.5, 5 months. I think you can see enough of what you want to see then. Dogs seem to do some crazy things during the fear impact stage. So they can lose a little bit of drive. They can get a bit distracted. So that 7 to 17 month period can be an interesting period to assess and train dogs. So if you can get it then before that fear impact stage kicks in, not to say that you aren't going to see the same sort of traits beforehand, but for me to really make that dog my own, I'd like to have him before he was 6 months. But I will still take dogs on past that up to 2.5. And
what about breeds for search work? What are your preferred breeds, Frank?
So in the batting order from best to last, and the last one I would still take it. For me, Springer Spaniel. I just think he is the Rolls Royce. If we could build him some extension on his legs, then I think he's going to be the best proactive, as in free running search dog. He's also going to be the best passive scanning dog. And the beauty of the Springer is, if you can imagine that I'm training dogs for other people, they're quite good, is that they'll bond quite quickly with a new handler. They'll actually bond with 2 or 3 handlers. So if you're in a position where you have the dog multi-handled, for me, that dog will easily work for other people, as long as they're following the same sort of training lines and the same sort of methodology that that dog would expect to be worked like. So for me, toppers is springers. I certainly like the Cocker. Cocker Spaniels are coming in, and the mix of the two. We have got a fabulous Sprocker.
Yeah.
And I think that is a breed that is, it's not a breed, it's a mix, but that is a really nice combination. And again, they can be quite big. They're very strong and sturdy, and they are useful in a number of different ways. And again, not as easily handled. You definitely have to know the dog well to be able to get the best of it. So I like the Sprocker. Obviously, Labs goes without saying, but I'm not the biggest fan of Labs, but when you get a good one, so the best dog in my company is a Lab. He's an ex-gun dog. He's a bit too strong, and his passive scanning is absolutely phenomenal, and his free search, again, his normal free running search, is amazing. The dog is meticulous, but they are few and far between. So if I can get a good one, I'm gonna bite your hand off to have it.
Is that a red? Is that a red Lab, Frank?
I have a fox red. It used to be any colour as long as it was red. They're hard to find. So we've got a standard issue black one. We won't talk about the other two colours, which have no relevance to work. In my experience, they've got no relevance to work. I've not seen many good yellows or chocolate, so I stay away. I'm sure there are some, but I've seen very few. So it's black or red for me. And then you see the logo, a pointer. I've got a couple of pointers and a little story. When back in the day when we were training using techniques which you could argue are now not in place today, and I had a 3-year-old pointer bitch, and this dog, I don't know if you were on the old camp or the new camp, but the old camp had a fence line running around the back of it and had 3 blocks, A, B, and C block, and it's probably the size of a football field. And this dog would just run around this area time after time after time, to the point where I remember sitting on the grass reading The Sun, because this dog would not listen to me or do anything that I asked it to do. And when I was then told to throw the lead at it, as you did back in those days, the dog sulked. And she sulked for 3 days. She wouldn't call up, she wouldn't look at me. And that's, when you have those little light bulb moments where you think, this isn't working. How do I get in this dog's head? And that German short-haired pointer bitch, and I had another one after it, taught me so much about empathy and trying to get inside that dog's head. You cannot yank and crank. You cannot use aversive techniques for stuff you don't understand. You just have to sit back, which is what I was doing quite a lot of time with this dog, and try to build a relationship with it. And once you've got a relationship with that breed, which is why Pointer is 4 and not 1, what a phenomenal working dog you've got. If there is a better, he's probably past his days now, but that black Pointer of mine for passive scanning, I've never seen a dog like it. He would be on fire, hunting and scanning. Amazing dog. And I'm sure other people have got similar experiences with the breed.
Yeah. Would you say, so there are some trainers out there who will use, excuse me, it's not correct. It's not a corona cough. There are some trainers out there who would use potentially the same methods of training for a number of breeds. Would you say that a pointer you need to use different techniques for a pointer as opposed to a Springer or a Lab or a Cocker?
All 4 of those breeds I work totally differently. If you see me work, you'll see that I virtually use no voice. I'm very quiet. The guys, when they come on courses, they are working on 4 elements of dog handling, of which voice is the last, because when you need it, you are going to need it, particularly if you're doing long searches. So it's got to be almost a powerful tool to use. And if you're constantly vocalizing with the dog, you just become background noise. So a lot of the time I'm using movement and body language. to get the dogs to work, but very little interaction with them. We go through so much work through pattern training, that the dog is almost doing it by itself.
Yeah.
When we discussed about it earlier, when I was running one of the projects, what we're trying to get away from is this cute and fluffy little Springer, this little Cocker, this really nice thing that, it will come up and give you a cuddle. You want to talk about it as a capability. And this is a piece of equipment that can do all these things. And when you're using it, you might have to adopt different techniques. And that's where I think sometimes we get a little bit confused, and we don't know how to speak to the clients, or we don't know how to operate the dog in the correct way. Not all breeds, not all dogs are the same. And you'll see that a lot of teams fail because they don't understand the operational way, not the operational way, but the genetic of that particular breed. And you've got to really get inside it, which is why I was failing with that pointer bitch for so long. Yeah. Because the Labrador, yeah, you could throw a lead at it and it would just wag its little tail and come on, and on he'd go. This young lady, she definitely stuck her paw up at me and said, if you're going to do that to me, Sunshine, you're going to get no joy. Yeah. So you really have got to understand. And that's another thing. Don't pick a breed of dog that doesn't fit your DNA. Pick something that, I mean, I like cheeky dogs. That's why I've got Cockers and Springers and Pointers. We've got one lab left. You know, we like dogs that are naughty because it's a little bit of my character that, you know, I was never a good soldier because I never liked being told what to do. You know, I wanted to do it always my way. So it's never a good recipe if you've got a dog that doesn't fit within your remit.
And what about, again, something that we've touched on before, pointy-eared breeds for search work? Now, obviously, there are, we won't mention them, but there are some organisations that say we shouldn't be using pointy-eared breeds for search work in the UK. But if you cross the channel, France, Germany, Holland, Finland, Sweden, pointy-eared breeds are what you're going to see doing the search work. What are your views on this, Frank?
So I think German Shepherd, yes, I agree. Most of the UK population knows what a German Shepherd looks like. 10 years ago, there weren't many, I'll probably say 12 years ago, because that's when the first Malleys came to really start to take over in the UK. Most of the general public do not know what a Malinois is. They think it's either a weird looking greyhound or a very skinny shepherd. Not one. You could probably do a straw poll of 100 people and you'd probably get 10% that would know it. And they probably are, because they're either from law enforcement or they're in the security industry or they've seen them work. So they don't understand that this dog can potentially do you a lot of damage. And as you've rightly said, if you go across the pond, not left but right, into Europe, most of the mainstay breeds are Malinois, who are dual purpose, very well socialized, very well bred for the most part. So our hang up over pointy ears for me is a bit of a misnomer. I do pet behavior. You are far more likely to get bitten by a mix of a Cocker than you ever are with a mix with a Malinois or a Malinois cross. Most of my behavior consultations are Cockadors or Cockapoos, because someone's messed around with the breed and messed with the head. The Malinois is an absolute fabulous breed as long as you have nurtured it, you understand where it's come from, and you know how to bring it on. When we were doing European games for Pyro, I've got Italian fans, French fans coming over the barriers trying to stroke his ears. You know, they've just got, yeah, fine. It's a Labrador in European eyes. So I think it's wrong to pigeonhole a dog just because it may look slightly more intimidating. And actually, for a European game, that's exactly what you want, but actually I'm basing the breed or basing the choice of dog I take based on those characteristics we talk about earlier. Because if you don't, we probably are missing out on some fantastic breeds because we haven't even thought about them, or we've just gone, that dog is used for that purpose and that dog is used for that purpose. So we've been using Malinois for search for a very long time in the private sector. So we do not align ourselves to people who have just closed their mind to the capabilities that these dogs offer.
If we can talk about, so you've been involved in some real nice projects when you were with the military. One thing I wanted to touch on was HASD, Frank. If you can, well, firstly, can you? Some people watching might not know what HASD dogs are, but could you tell us your involvement in those and briefly about the role of a HASD dog?
Yeah, so HASD its full term is called a high assurance search dog. In 2008, I went on tour to Afghanistan with my unit 104. We took in 20 people. We took in 18 dogs. We took some dogs over there. 14 of those dogs were the conventional arms explosive. We didn't have EDD dogs then. They were trained to find weapons and explosives. That year, you saw a massive transformation in how the enemy were trying to kill us. And that was by burying stuff under the ground. That dog that was operating in Iraq was doing an absolutely amazing job because most of the devices that they were placing out were above ground. What the Taliban and associated enemy forces were doing were placing them below ground. Now, those people that know about detection dogs, EDDs and AES will know that they're working on air scent. So we weren't having the successes that we should have. Well, we wouldn't have had the successes because the dogs were just moving too fast. They're trying to pick the scent up, moving through the air and just not successful enough. It was actually one of Prince Harry's friends that was killed in Kandahar. And the question was asked when he went through this checkpoint, had the area been searched by a dog properly, the area wasn't searched, would it have prevented this soldier from being killed? So a statement of requirement, which is what the MOD do when they see a capability gap, they put an awful lot of money towards it. And literally when I came back from tour in the September, I was asked if I would run the project in October. And we started looking at ways to train dogs to find devices in the ground. We used the old system that the MOD had used for Bosnia and Kosovo, which was placing little pots in the ground, and we'd put little bits of TNT and dogs would search the pots, and we'd get the pots closer and closer together so that you'd get a continual line of dogs searching. But I was looking at the dogs. One was a chocolate lab. We had a Malinois, we had a German Shepherd, we had a couple of yellow labs, and you could just see that we were missing a trick. Something was not quite right. I had the beauty of working with the Danish Air Force in Kandahar. Their Mallies were amazing. And that's a program, if you want to see how you develop dogs, those boys have got it right. They've got those dogs. They were 4 and 5, so they're very experienced dogs, and they cope with the heat phenomenally. And I remember speaking to the guy in charge. I said, where the hell do you get them Mallies from? Or where can I find Malinois like that? And I got the contact. We went over to the south of France. There was a guy called Turgay who was running MPA. You know MPA very well. I showed him the video of our dogs working. Now, bear in mind, I'm a sergeant major. I've been training dogs for 16, 17 years. I think I am the dog's cojones when it comes to detection. I've got my little Apple map there. I'm showing videos, and Turgay is laughing. His friend and colleague is laughing. Even my wife is laughing. I want to slap her around the head, saying, what are you laughing for? He says, Frank, you are 10 years behind when it comes to detecting things in the ground. And he was there to buy a breed bit. He'd been looking on the road for 3 months. He said, come over to Sarajevo. Come and have a look. So went back, arranged a flight, went over there, and we got the opportunity Which, like I was saying about the Aussies, where we were, where they were, we got the opportunity to leapfrog perhaps 10 years to train the same methods, similar methods, not all the same, because obviously ours were military working dogs, not working in a closed mine environment. And we then started training the dogs along similar lines to which MPA were doing. And a massive thanks to those guys, because undoubtedly what they did was enabled us to train the capability with the bits that we needed to add on. We started to see the Kong method, which now everybody understands, or most people understand. It's now not uncommon. But in 2008, when you're going back to all your other dog trainer mates and saying we're going to use Malinois as search and we're going to use little bits of plastic, you can imagine what I was being talked about in the bar that night. Yeah. So it upset a lot of people. And if it had gone wrong, my neck would have been on the chopping block, and obviously I'd have put a lot of lives at risk. But we stuck with it. The two guys, in fact, we had 3 or 4 in the end that ended up working on the project. And we were there. We stayed in Afghanistan trying to prove the concept. And it was really frustrating because every month we'd try and get to the point where the dogs are being deployed, and they'd fail, and they'd fail again, and they'd fail again. And it must have taken a good 8 months before the 2 dogs were operational. And I'll finish on that. There are two things that stick in my mind. There was a Malinois called Chocolate, and you can probably find it on the news. He did a search. He walked past a garage, and he indicated. Now, a blind man would have seen all these pressure plates in this garage. The garage was open. There were just stacks and stacks of pressure plates. But obviously, the media saw this, dog finds, hero dog finds loads and loads of IEDs. And I say anyone could have seen it. It was just the fact that the dog handler was there first. But that sold the capability. That put military working dogs, for all the work that the GP dogs and the AES dogs were doing, this was a game changer, because this is a dog that is actually going to make a real impact. Because although I love my dog, I also would love my children. I don't have children, but to know that there's something else going out there helping me as much as a metal detector or, other elements that are out there, the fact that you've got a dog that's well trained that could potentially save your life, is just amazing. And then the other one, which sold it to the engineers, was this dog searched within a meter of him searching. The dog indicated, and obviously the vehicles have gone past it. The engineers have been walking up and down the road. They've used the metal detectors, and this dog wouldn't move. And what are you doing? He said, my dog's indicated, so we've got to check it. And there was a pressure plate IED. And luckily the wires had been cut, but the main charge was there. So if it's on the road, you can guarantee that explosive was probably around about 15, 25 kilos. So it would have done utter devastation. And from that point, the RAVC and the engineers hadn't really worked together from probably 96. Well, for a very long time, they hadn't really worked cheek by jowl. But from that moment, and obviously all the other stuff that we were doing with the other guys, the engineers were like, wherever we go, we're taking these dogs. And that's what changed, I think, where military working dogs are today. That, and obviously the subsequent dogs that have come after it.
You mentioned you mentioned something in there about the Hasdi dogs with Kong, and there's lots of people using Kong these days. Frank, is it something that you use? And there's loads of videos out there, people training their dogs to find a whole Kong, sections of Kong, and minute pieces of Kong. I like using Kong. Some of my dogs, if a dog likes a Kong, then I use it. If it doesn't, then I'll use a tennis ball or a tuggy or whatever. But what are your thoughts on Kong and the way people are using it?
Yeah, I think there's now a lot of on social media. There's a lot of good stuff that's going out there with the use of the Kong. I'm sold. I've now been using it for 12 years. I like the fact that my memory's not that great. So if I leave a piece of Kong behind, I remember a good friend of mine putting some explosive on a bus that was driving down High Street of Melton Mowbray, and he's going, "Where's that vehicle that we was?" Oh my God, that's so weird. Thankfully, the control room had the bus number. We were able to get it back. So for that, if nothing else, losing some explosive taking happy shoppers around the town centres is a good thing. But I think what's clever about it is it's universal. If you say I train on the Kong method and you're selling your dog to Southeast Asia or North America, then there's an understanding of what you've done to reach that standard. You will know as much as I do that even having worked with the UN, trying to get explosives to train on is really difficult. In UK, it's bloody hard. And I say I was on UN Ops and some of their kit was 10, 12 years old, and they haven't grasped the concept of, if we're using explosive detection dogs, you've got to give them the full support. So again, in that regard, you can maintain a dog very easily with Kong. And going back to Afghan, when the Taliban started using a different type of threat, which was no metal in their pressure plates or in their devices, and an explosive called ammonium nitrate and aluminium, we pulled all the dogs in on the Friday. We did a week's training. We weren't using Kong at the time. We did a week's training, and the following Friday, the 14 dogs were back out finding ammonium nitrate and aluminium. All the explosive kits that we'd brought from the UK were sat in an ISO container. So the thousands of pounds that DSCL and all the others had put together these kits were totally irrelevant. So had we had Kong at that period of time, I could have so easily have put Kong with that ammonium nitrate and aluminium and brought the threshold down. I could have had those dogs done even quicker. Yeah. So the beauty that you can train a dog, so we have a new emerging threat, we have something that the dog already understands, place the two together, reduce the threshold of the Kong piece to the point where there's nothing there. You've got a dog very quickly imprinted on a new odor, and it makes it so much more effective and also efficient. So I like the Kong method because I say most people will understand if I say that my dog's trained on Kong, and because we are a selling agency, we sell dogs. I think if you've got that system, it makes it far more easier to move the dog on, because that's when your problems will occur, not with your training, but with how that dog interacts with your new handler or your new organization. If they're not on the same wavelength, I think I've seen it. I've seen a lot of my dogs ruined because one guy trains a dog one way and obviously I've produced it another. So for that regard, I think the Kong system is very clever. And you can do it with tennis ball. You can do it with actually any scent. So it doesn't have to be necessarily the Kong, because we get the dog bombed out on the Kong. I've done it with tennis ball and then paired the Kong with the tennis ball or with the odor and done the same thing. So there's lots of ways you can do it, but the actual concept I think is very clever.
We touched briefly on, obviously, when you were with the military, you wrote courses, which leads me on to my next question, which is about what you're doing at the moment. And you're obviously heavily involved in the use of dogs with conservation. And the UK now is lucky enough that it's going to have a new conservation qualification, which is something that you've written for conservation dog handlers. So yeah, can you? I know that the conservation dogs it's an area that interests a lot of people, and there'll probably be a lot of people watching this who are wanting to know more about this. So yeah, conservation dogs and your new Lantra qualification, Frank.
Yeah, we started. My journey into conservation started back in actually '94 when we trained some ivory section dogs for Kenya. So I didn't actually think that dogs could be used for that, but doing a lot of vehicle checkpoints, going out and searching for ivory tusks. And I didn't get the opportunity to go out to Kenya, but I was involved in the selection and some of the training. So that was my first exposure to it. And then we had a Malinois that was trained as a a pyro dog, and he had a thunder flash thrown in his face on his second game, and it just destroyed him. And so we were wondering what the hell to do with the dog, because beautiful dog, fully trained detection dog. And then because we work very closely with the Lancashire Wildlife Trust, because we're using their training areas, there's a young girl called Rachel Cripps, who's head of their the Red Squirrel Project. And we didn't even choose the dog to go to her because of that. We just said, because she just recently lost her German Shepherd, I just said, oh, do you fancy a new dog? And there was Max sat in the back of my van, and she spoke with Matt, her other half, and within a few days they decided they were going to have it. And a couple of months down the line, Rachel said, do you think we could train to find red squirrel? And because he was already trained, again, using the Kong system, instead of finding, as long as red squirrels aren't carrying pyro or drugs, we knew we'd be safe.
Yes.
So we could very quickly imprint him on red squirrel carcass, and the world is your oyster. She's gone off, and it was nice because, for me, it was nice because although all my previous stuff I've done with the military is probably in a security footing, you know, where you're either trying to save someone or protect something human. Now, when we got involved with this, being a little bit of an environmentalist and really care about the planet, to be able to put something back with one of our dogs was fantastic. And then it was Sean had found a contract for us, a contract with the RSPB, and we put together the package, never expecting to win the tender, and it's just sort of just do it because we understood that there was another one coming on later in the year, and got a call a couple of weeks back or later, sorry, saying that we'd actually secured the contract. So I was as bamboozled as everybody else, thinking, okay, we've got the backing of Rachel's, you know, phenomenal when it comes to ecology and conservation. Sean's got a huge background in conservation, and there's me here who can just, you know, teach the dog to sit and do a little bit of searching. So actually the team worked really well, and we were due to produce the dogs in May. COVID has just hit us for absolute six, and as I spoke to you the other day, me and Sean were looking after 26 dogs at the beginning of lockdown, because we still retained some dogs for security with the football clubs and the music events, and it's just been really, really difficult. But the conservation piece, when I took it on, like all the other projects, I wanted to do the research, see what was available, see how dogs are trained, seeing the standards, looking at the SOPs, looking at the accreditation, and I couldn't find anything. In fact, the only documentation that there was from New Zealand. So we used that as a bit of a template. And because part of the contract is to train the handlers, I thought what would be really nice is if we gave these handlers an accreditation. So we looked at all the awarding bodies. I wasn't going to touch HABC with a barge pole. So we looked at some others. And the one that just came to fruition was Lantra. Lantra is a field-based awarding body. They've already got, I think, 39 qualifications in conservation already. So very quickly in, I think, April of last year, we started making tentative inquiries about getting the course done. And only probably 2 or 3 weeks ago did we finally get it across the line. So it's taken an awful lot of work. A lot of people have helped, and it's, you know, it's just at the baseline. I'm sure it's not correct. There's a group called the Ecology Detection Group, Britain and Ireland. It's run by Gacola. These are conservationists, and they're not even dog people, but they want to get into dogs, and they're bringing all the best and the brightest of the industry in UK together to say, this is what we want as a standard. This is what we'd like to see in the course. And even though we are sort of the facilitators of it, we've given ownership to the group to say, you tell us what you think should be entailed. And what's going to be fantastic for the 3 guys from Orkney who are going to do it is they'll be the first accredited handlers for conservation, probably globally, because I say I haven't seen another course or qualification that's got that awarding body tick. And then the plan is these guys will do Stoat, We've got our guys that are wanting to do red squirrel, so that people can come back on and do extra modules and get qualified in a different species. Again, led by experts, externally assessed. So we're not marking it. It's got to be done by somebody else. And I think this is a really good template for the rest of the dog industry, where probably conservation was miles behind 18 months ago. I think actually with this ecology detection dog group and the way they're running things, and we're an active part of it, I think the others industries, including our industries of security, they're going to lead the way and for others to follow. So it's really exciting times. And for a client, and bear in mind, I've had 2 or 3 clients come to look at our establishment. They don't know what questions to ask. They don't know a good dog from a bad dog. They don't know if what I'm saying is true. So from a client's perspective, the fact that you've got standards there, you've got a tick box that you must be able to fulfill before you are awarded a contract. So not only from the dog side will it be important, from the client side who wants to employ a dog team, it's going to be important for them as well, because they can see the criteria that this dog handler or this organisation has gone through to be able to tender for a contract. And I think that is definitely the way ahead.
How important is it to have courses independently assessed, and in your opinion, and not have someone from the same organisation, as an instructor and an assessor? How important is it to have someone come from the outside to assess?
So can I take it from 2 sides? I don't think there's anyone who can assess my AES EDD teams better than me, only because I've been doing it for so long. I've watched thousands upon thousands of searches. I've probably seen every search, so I know exactly what I need to see to be able to say that team is good enough to deploy. However, if you look at the whole circle of when you go through the training loop and the accreditation process, it doesn't stand up. I cannot assess my own homework, because that's, if something goes wrong, you've just assessed him because he's your dog handler and it's your dog and you trained it. So while I don't think someone can assess a team better than me, I will bow to the fact that for credibility and to make sure that we close that whole loop, somebody has to assess that team. That being said, we had a couple of guys from the UN come and assess dogs when I was out there. These guys have never handled operationally EDD dogs, but yet they've been appointed. So they're assessing, they've come up with some weird and wonderful tests, they've come up with some weird and wonderful ideas, and I didn't like it because it just wasn't representative of what the guys are going to do. So by all means have an external assessment, but please make sure those guys are qualified to do it. Don't just, and I'm saying that bearing in mind, I got on a flight as VSAT to Afghanistan to assess another unit, and we were writing the assessment on the journey out, because you would think that we would have, by that stage, have got a house in order and have a list of criteria that the dog team has to achieve to be able to go on the ground. It was finger in the air, make it up as you go along. And that's not that long ago. Yeah. Now, obviously, they've got their ducks in a row, and there's now I believe there's a proper accreditation process. But if someone is going to externally validate anybody, they've got to be qualified and knowledgeable enough to do it. So if you look at our conservation piece, we're going to have the client there so that he can see it's being done. We'll have a dog expert, not necessarily has to be an expert in conservation dogs, but a detection dog's a detection dog. I don't care, what it's being tasked to do. And then you have someone to make sure that the action's on, whether it be the biosecurity, how you handle it, how you deal with something when you found it. So you've got all those pieces together before someone can tick you off to say, I'm happy with that team. Because if you put someone unqualified who's doing your independent assessment, then it's just as bad as I might as well just do it myself.
Yeah. And when is the first course that you're running, or have you run any courses yet, Frank, for conservation?
We go up to Orkney which actually was a really good decision. They should have started tomorrow, actually. We put it back a couple of weeks because the dogs weren't quite ready. We weren't quite happy with them. So we got up to Orkney on the 7th of November. We're going to do 3 weeks training. We've already handed the guys a lot of the pre-course package, which has all been newly written. We've just left it in a nice, easy format, because it's probably with my spelling, there'll be some absolute shockers in there. There'll probably some right ramblings going on. So we'll get it to a point where everyone's had a really good look at it, and then we'll produce a publication. And then what will happen is the extra modules. So Rachel's writing the Red Squirrel one. We've got a young lady called Frances Morris who's doing Dormouse. We're going to ask Kieran from Ireland to write Bat and Bird. So we're going to have industry experts writing the modules using best practice. And it will constantly be updated. And if someone sees anything that's wrong, or they've developed something new, it can be quickly changed. I look at a manual that an organisation is used, and again, as we spoke about, that was stuff I wrote in '94, and it's still being used today. And that was out of date when we wrote it. So you've got to have a system where you can constantly update, and it just doesn't stay, it doesn't change, because then the document's only good as a doorstop.
We're up to our hour, believe it or not, Frank. Time has flown by. We probably haven't touched on a lot of things that we should have. Thank you very much for your time. That hour has flown by. Perhaps you could come back after you've done one of your courses on Orkney, and talk more about conservation and the Lantra qualifications and how things are going. But thank you for your time tonight. Really appreciate it. Having someone with your experience and knowledge on here, and there's been lots of people watching. So I hope everybody's enjoyed it. Thank you, Frank.
Thanks, Stu. Thanks, everybody. By all means, get in touch if you want to ask any questions or learn any more about the courses.
Yeah, brilliant. There you are. That's excellent. Thanks, Frank. So Frank Holmes from Kryus. Brilliant. Thanks, Frank. I'll speak to you later.
Take care, mate.
Yes. Okay. So that's an hour flown by. Thanks to Frank there. Again, someone with his experience and knowledge and career in dogs. An hour, we haven't really touched it on all the little subjects and topics that we should have, but we'll hopefully have him back. We're going to be doing a couple more of these, so keep an eye out. We have got another 2 speakers planned, another 2 guests, so keep your eyes peeled for our next speaker. Thanks for watching, and please spread the word as well. You can watch these for free, obviously, on Facebook and on YouTube. Thanks for supporting. And if anybody out there has got any would like to see anybody come on K9 Live Talk, then please drop me an email. Drop me a message, and I'm always open to suggestions for people to come on and talk on K9 Live Talk. So thanks very much, and we shall see you hopefully in a couple of weeks. Bye-bye.